Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and we are happy to have you here with us tonight. Let me bring in my co-host tonight. Please welcome in Phil Bossman. Hey, Phil, how's it going?
I'm doing very well. I'm super excited to have this great night, and I'm super excited to learn about Windows 365 with Donna Ryan. And
I was just about to ask you what are we going to be talking about tonight?
Well, really, the Microsoft's new product, or call it new product, is Windows 365, but this is the PowerShell group. And so really, I want to see how I can better manage my or Windows 365, VDIs and all that kind of stuff, and really get a primer on how to get that all squared away. And so that's why I reached out to Donna, and I'm super excited to have her join us and let her share her knowledge with us. And so welcome to the group, Donna.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I love being invited to user groups I haven't had a chance to present at yet. And this is my first time with Research Triangle PowerShell. And especially it's more rare for me to be in front of a PowerShell group. So the nice thing with those is it's not just systems management folks. So I'm sure that there's a variety of technical disciplines amongst the audience that this can hopefully at least resonate some with. Especially any VDI admins that we have out there, because this is, while Windows 365 is, kind of like VDI, it's not really VDI, and I'll get into all of that stuff. So
awesome.
Just a little bit about myself. And so I am a senior PM on the Windows 365 CAT team at Microsoft. Prior to that, I was working at CDW for shy of 11 years as a consulting engineer. Started with Config Manager, picked up remote desktop services, which is how I kind of got into the whole VDI realm. Intune, Autopilot. I was really heavy into OSD. I did earn my Microsoft MVP title a couple of years ago, which I had to turn in when I went to go work for them. So still very proud of that title. And I also wrote a community tool that's used by, best as I can tell based off my downloads from the PowerShell gallery, about 2,500 organizations using the tool. And what Wimwich does is it provides users with a GUI to make the choices for performing offline image servicing. And so, mounting a Windows image, injecting updates, language packs, registry keys, XMLs, all sorts of fun stuff. She can do most everything. Also integrates with Configuration Manager as well. On the PowerShell side, I am 100% self-taught. When I started working on Wimwich, probably the longest script I had written was maybe about 40 lines. And there was no error correction. There was no handling. There was no logging. There were no functions. It was just, and when I undertook Wimwich, I knew it was possible. I just didn't know how. So everything I've learned on PowerShell is self-taught. So the takeaway that I like to present to folks is that if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm not the most brilliant person or the best coder. I may not always follow best practices, but I just like encouraging folks to get out there and start writing. Find a problem and fix it. You can. It's a really amazing feeling to have folks from around the world just reach out to you to say, hey, your tool, saved my butt or saved me a ton of time. So, if you're on the fence or you have an idea, embrace it. Please do. It's wonderful. All right, you came here to hear about Windows 365, or at least to hang out with a friend. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward onto our topic du jour, which is Windows 365. So,
I was just gonna say thank you, because you did all the work for me. I was going to say, hey, could you tell us a little about yourself? And could you tell us what Windows 365 is? So you've done that already. So thank you. And so let's turn it over to you. And so you do what you do. And just remember, maybe some people might not be familiar with what Windows 365 is. So maybe that's a good start to just let them know what it is before we even jump into the why you should use PowerShell or anything like that.
Absolutely. So the one last thing to notate on the slide before I go ahead and move over. If you're on Twitter, you should be on Twitter. My handle is at the notorious DRR. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and follow me, please do. I'll tweet about Windows 365, 3D printing, PowerShell, home automation, Star Trek, random musings. So fun stuff. But yeah, so the way I'm going to handle this presentation, I'm going to start with the basics and try to keep the slides to a minimum because I hate slides. I'm going to hop into a demo to show you how the console works so you can get those visual cues of the different mechanisms and how they interplay. And then we'll look at what you can do with PowerShell to start, making your own automated processes. And since I can't see the chat window, so if somebody throws a chat question, just go ahead and interrupt me. I have no problem with that.
We will happy to read up questions where they need to be, and we'll take care of it. Thanks, Donna.
Awesome. All right, so here's the first question. So what is and what isn't Windows 365? So Windows 365 is technically SaaS, so that's software as a service. I think that's what the first S stands for, which means it's a fully baked solution as a service. So what does that mean from a VDI standpoint? Well, what you're getting is every user gets their own personal virtual machine, which is great because you don't have to worry about profile disks and multi-sessions and shutting things down and spinning them up and that kind of fun stuff. It's one user, one VM, and you can essentially, for the most part, treat it like you would any physical PC. What we're handling on the back end is we're handling the connection brokering, the gateways, the networking, and yes, there's an asterisk in there. We'll get to that. But we're also handling, the technicalities of the provisioning, and it's really just a very easy service to get a hold of. Now, the really cool thing too is this is also easily scalable. You can go from 0 to thousands of seats very quickly, which, depending on scenarios, you may want that. Mergers and acquisitions, is my favorite example of where Windows 365 fits in. Say your organization just bought or merged with a company. Hey, we need to get, X amount of desktops to these users. Okay, add into the AAD group. Boop, in an hour, there's their machines. It's brilliant. It really is. The cool thing, some folks like, some folks don't, but this is a value add for Windows 365 is the fixed cost. Why that's a value? Every time when I was working with AVD and talking with my clients, they're like, well, what's this going to cost me? Oh, are you going to turn on and off your hosts? How many hosts you're going to have? Are you going to implement scaling? So if you're in an org that really needs to have, predictable fixed costs, Windows 365 is a slam dunk. It does come in essentially two flavors. It's business and enterprise, and I'll cover the nitty gritty on that one. But really, it's not a traditional VDI service because you as the admin aren't responsible for trying to predict how many session hosts do you need. You're not trying to spin things up and spin things down. You're not trying to squeeze every penny out of a session host. You don't need to figure on the backend profile disk handling. You don't have to come up with the scaling plans. It's just easy. It's honestly, I've been deploying Windows professionally now for 11 plus years, and this is the easiest way I've ever seen to deploy Windows. So you'll see, it's awesome.
So question there, as it relates to Azure Virtual Desktop, is it like on steroids, or is it just a specific niche market of that?
It's not really on steroids because AVD does different things. Sure, AVD does do persistent desktops. It absolutely does. But then you still have to manage those virtual machines. You're still paying by the minute. You need to handle the assignments. those, and you still have to build out that whole VDI infrastructure to support all of that. You also have remote app, which is something that we don't do. You have multi-session, which we don't do. Ours is much more of a turnkey than it is something like AVD. And that's not to say that one is better than the other. A lot of folks like to start these conversations with, let's do AVD versus Windows 365. Well, why? They're not competing. They're different. They're different solutions for different folks. What works for some orgs isn't going to work for others. These also really can work together very nicely. If you have a mature AVD environment stood up, but you need to have some flexibility in quick provisioning or onboarding, you can use Windows 365 as as a stopgap because it's very simple to deploy. So it's now as they relate, we do use a lot of AVD's backend services. We're using gateways, and we're using the connection brokering, and we sit on top of it. And we're open about it, but how the admins interact with it and how the users interact with it is different.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Yep. All right, so when we're looking at Windows 365, we have the two flavors. We got business and enterprise. And business is a much more limited solution. It's Azure AD only, no hybrid. Intune is not required. Now, you can enroll into Intune because in that particular case, you can treat the cloud PC, and that's sometimes interchangeably use Cloud PC with Windows 365. I tend to use Windows 365 as the name of the service, and the Cloud PC as the VM object that we're building. That's kind of how I use that vernacular. But so you could still enroll that device into Intune if you wanted to, but you don't get the Windows 365 specific management interface. Business is limited to 300 seats. So if you're trying to save a couple of pennies but deploy to 10,000 users, business SKU is not going to be for you. And really, it is the management is still very much limited. It is what it is. We have plenty of customers on it that it's filling a great role. I'm on the enterprise side, so that's really where I spend more of my time. Enterprise gives you flexibility, lots of flexibility. You can do Azure AD, you can do Azure AD joined, you can do hybrid, but Intune is required. So I guess let me step back for once. Licensing. That's what I was going to just dive into. So when you're trying to determine what size of virtual machine you're going to provision for your users, it's actually based off of the license. So what you'll end up doing is you'll end up buying X amount of however many you need licenses that are like a 2-core 8 gig 256 machine, or a 4-core 16 gig 256, an 8x32. So you purchase that license and then when you assign that license to the user, now they have the rights to a virtual machine of that size. But with enterprise, we also need a couple other things. We need to have an Intune license, so the user can enroll the device into Intune automatically and can leverage the Intune portal. You also do need a Windows 10 or a Windows 11 enterprise license. I may use Windows 10 and 11 interchangeably because there's not that much of a difference really when it comes to Win 365. So generally what's applicable to 11 is also applicable to 10. Now, the cool thing, though, is if you're using, like an M365 E3 or E5, cool, you already have the Intune and you have the Windows 10 license. You just need your Cloud PC licenses. So if you're already heavily invested in the Microsoft ecosystem, you really just need to add the cost of the license. The enterprise SKU is fully managed from Intune or MEM. I tend to use those terms interchangeably as well, as it's still Intune. But if you're in a co-managed environment or heavily leveraging Configuration Manager, we 100% support Configuration Manager. A lot of folks that are still trying to make that move to the cloud, and nothing wrong with that. Config manager is an excellent tool. So that can be used to manage as well. We also have within Endpoint Analytics, which is a feature within Intune itself. We have a couple of Windows 365 specific reports on connectivity and model performance. But there's also a neat tool within Endpoint Analytics, and I've leveraged it fairly extensively for some of the stuff I've written for our GitHub repo, and it's called proactive remediation. And essentially what you do is you write two scripts, a detection script and a remediation script. And the engine that manages it, all it's looking for is 0 or 1. So in your detection script, you can have it go look at the reg key or go see if the file is there or is this app installed or whatever condition you need. And if the condition is satisfied and you're compliant, return 0, else return 1. And if you return 1, then it kicks in the remediation script and then it can go fix whatever you need. Very handy tool. That's not necessarily Windows 365 specific, but I've used it a lot for fixing things and remediating issues. And so I was just actually thinking about this the other day. I'm really proud. I work on Windows 365. And what does that mean? It means I spend about 75% of my time involved with networking and the other 25% of the time involved with Teams. So, and why I make that crack about networking is because this is really where, if you're going to start a deployment, you kind of need to figure out what you want the network to do or how you want it to be laid out. And so when we're looking at topologies, if we're going to go down the Azure AD route, we support two different scenarios. You can use an Azure VNet and put your cloud PCs on there, and that works. There's an asterisk to that. It has to be in a supported region. The VNet needs to be deployed into a supported region where we support Windows 365, and that's how you can place it within the world. And a lot of folks are doing that. That's very valuable if you have back-end applications or internal software that needs to be accessed. You can build your VNet with a site-to-site or express route. However you need to handle that, you can lock it down to your heart's desire as long as you leave all the requisite IP addresses and URLs exposed so we can get out and talk to the service. But the one that we also have an option if we're going Azure AD called the Microsoft Hosted Network. And the really cool thing about that is if you don't have an Azure subscription today, you don't need one to do Windows 365 at all. If you're going to do ABD, yep, you need an Azure subscription, full stop. You don't with Win 365. The network segment that it gets put on is managed by Microsoft. It's secured by Microsoft. It's included in the service. It's no additional fee for doing that. Whereas if you're going to build your own virtual networks, then you need to look at peering costs, ingress, egress. If you're doing site-to-sites or express route, there's added costs. And what you can do is in the Microsoft hosted network is you could just go ahead and deploy a VPN client. And so if your end user needs to connect something on site, use a VPN. And it makes it super easy. If you want to do a proof of concept, big pro tip, just start with Azure AD Join and Microsoft Hosted first because it's by far the easiest. On the opposite side, the hardest, we have hybrid Azure AD Join, which is more limited, that it only works with virtual networks, which makes sense because we need to be able to talk to your on-premises Active Directory environment, and you couldn't do that if you're doing Microsoft hosted. And so, yeah, dealing with HAJ, you have to have line of sight, the domain controller. That's a hard requisite. And so depending on what you need to do or where your organization is on a cloud standpoint, those are really your options.
So a couple questions that we're going to jump up. Is it available in GCC?
That is on the public roadmap slated for the end of the year. That's okay. What we have on our public roadmap right now.
And if you have your existing Azure VNets, you can just connect to the Windows 365 one, right? So if you're going to add it, you just have to do an interconnect between the two?
You can. It depends on where you have things provisioned, or where you have your infrastructure built. So, like as an example, East US 2 is one of our supported regions. So if all of your infrastructure in East US 2, you can just use your existing VNets. If you are in, how is that, like North Central US, where we don't support, then you would have to make a VNet in a supported area and then peer them or make that interconnect.
That's what I got. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, Donna, just to summarize what you were saying, it sounds like the term you used early on when people were asking Windows 365 versus Azure Virtual Desktop is really turnkey. If you are looking for something to kind of get set up and just take out of the box with a couple of choices to make, this sounds like the perfect way to go. If you need to configure every switch and knob and you want it to fit exactly into your existing Azure AD environment with everything and all the bells and whistles, maybe Azure Virtual Desktop is a better choice. Does that sort of that a fair assessment?
I'd say it's a fair assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, because you VDI admins, it's taken you years to develop those skills. There's so much nuance and tricks and tips that we've learned over the years and how to optimize that image and squeeze every last CPU cycle out of it. And if you have that knowledge and you're comfortable with it and you're good at it, by all means use AVD. It's a fantastic solution. I love AVD. But for folks that don't have VDI admins or experience, Windows 365 makes a hell of a lot of sense. So
I was just going to say, and to add on top of that, Jason was just asking, Windows 365 is like a flat rate on the license, not a per minute usage cost, right? So you pay whatever you pay, and you can consume all month long and not have to worry about, how much was this on, and are we using this effectively?
Yep. And the other cool thing too is if you're managing multi-session hosts with an AVD, you don't have to make golden images anymore. You don't have to rebuild your hosts, because since these are just persistent virtual machines, you can just use Windows Update for Business and then just treat them like you would a laptop or a desktop. All that complexity of VDI just doesn't exist. At least to the front, or what's exposed to the admins. Now what goes ahead behind the scenes in Azure and the team, that's another story. But that's the value add, is that you don't have to do any of that, or you don't have to worry about that. That's our problem, not yours.
And so I was just thinking as you were talking, are people using this like an appliance situation? Like people in the field just have like essentially dumb terminal laptops that just fire up and join Windows, run Windows 365, or is it not that simple? Can that be used in that kind of situation?
Yeah,
like you want to deploy?
absolutely.
Yeah, so you need to deploy to a workforce that's mobile or something like that, and you don't need to worry about all this stuff. They can essentially have a dumb terminal laptop that just fires up and kicks off right to Windows 365 and connects for them. Maybe they enter some credentials, and then you're managing them through the cloud that way. That's an interesting solution. Yeah.
Yep. And there's features coming next year that were announced earlier this year. One of them is boot to cloud. So what you would essentially do is there'll be, from what I've seen from the demos, you power up your device. It'll give you the Azure AD logon prompt. You log in, boom, you're connected to your cloud PC. You don't even need to configure any VDI. You don't have to build kiosk mode. You don't have to do your multi-app selections. It's just there, so you can deploy cheap machines that you just count as disposable or send them out, and if you get them back, cool, or if not, whoopee. But there's lots of scenarios.
So
folks coming up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so related to that, can you have multiple Windows 365? Can you assign multiple to a user?
Yes-ish. So you can have multiple cloud PCs if they are of a different SKU.
Okay.
And so you can't have two 2x8 by 256, but you could have one 2x8 and one 4x16. Okay. And that's really just currently an effect of applying the license. because
Okay.
you can't apply two licenses to
Two of the
same
same
licenses.
Yeah, I got you.
And that's criticism that we've heard and we've taken back. The thing I like to keep in mind too with this is this service has only been publicly available for just a little bit more than a year. And if you look at how long it took Microsoft to hit perfection with Windows when they got to version 3.1.1, I mean, you're looking at, at least a decade. So, from what we've grown and built within, the last year, is just the growth of this solution, the amount of features that get added. It's just astonishing sometimes,
Yeah.
at least to me.
So the next question though was with like golden images and stuff like that. You can set up a license and then you can control from a VDI perspective, like, hey, these are my golden images and these are pre-staged applications and stuff like that, right?
You could, and we'll get into the
Okay.
pros and cons of image management. That's actually the next slide.
Okay.
You can do that. Let me just let's pin that one because that's a very good topic.
I respect that. Go.
Okay. So the last couple things I just really want to point out here is the network considerations. If your security standpoint is anything in the cloud, everything has to come back onto on-premises to make it through our IPS system to then go back out, you're going to have poor performance. Latency is key. As long as you're getting, give or take, under 100 milliseconds, you should be just fine. Clearly, the lower the better. Really what you want to do is you really want to allow the cloud PC to talk to the Microsoft services directly. And we're doing that with Office. We're doing that with Teams. It's really no different. We have a listing of all the URLs. Currently, it's a laundry list. We are condensing and working on simplifying that. Same thing with the IP addresses and the gateways that we need. We're working on simplifying that. No promises on when that's available, but if that's all published, those exceptions need to be made. And so if you're good, if you go down like the Microsoft hosted network route, don't deploy a full tunnel VPN. That's going to break. Because once you've authenticated, the VPN connects. Okay, now the VPN has broken your connections to the service. You have a disconnect and you connect back in. Split tunnel is absolutely where it's at. And again, just be wary of packet inspections. That's really why when I talk about, I spend most of my time in networking is we're getting disconnects. Okay, what VPN? So just good food for thought. Anything else on networking before we move over to to images?
No, other than the assumption that, because it's in the cloud and it's in Azure itself, that, Teams performance and other things like that are optimized for that kind of performance, right?
Yes. Yeah, Teams is a whole nother ball of wax, and its optimizations. But yes, anything that we're putting on there is optimized for Windows 365. Some of it's sleight of hand, like it is with Teams, but yeah, it is. And just an ancillary, just an ancillary point too is when you have these machines riding in Azure, my God, it's the internet connection that you have when you're just sitting right on top of Microsoft's backbone connection. Oof. I've got a friend and mentor from the community, Johan Arwidmark, has started using Windows 365 to do content transfer testing. And he's at home, he's got like a 20 megabit connection. So trying to deal with, 60 gig files is problematic. So he started using Windows 365 because you're on the backbone. It takes nothing to transfer large loads. So fun stuff.
Cool. All right, let's get you going.
All right, cool. Where's my cursor? There we go. All right, images. So we essentially have two core options when it comes to images with Windows 365. There's the gallery images, which was what we officially suggest you use. Reason being is the image itself is updated monthly. We do have optimizations for VDI already baked into it. If you're deploying Office as part of the cloud PC, the Teams optimizations are included as well. You can also choose to do Office or not do Office, which a lot of folks are really starting to move to gallery. We do support custom, so you can use a Windows Enterprise SKU, but only enterprise. So you can't cheat and think, oh, I'm just going to go reuse my multi-session. Yeah, it won't work. It won't accept it. If you're going to upload it, you own the optimizations. You know, and anytime you do a captured image or a golden image, any of the third-party apps that are in there, they can't be updated. So we really try to shy folks away from that. You know, if you've got applications that are really large, like you're trying to deploy like an AutoCAD or I don't know, some other monstrous thing, and you don't want to wait for all that time to download them, you know, maybe baking it in there is good. We had a lot of folks starting off with custom images, especially when they're coming from VDI, because that's, you know, that's a VDI staple. And we try to discourage that, but we had folks that had the scenario where they needed to have security apps on there before users logged in. And we've solved for that by supporting the enrollment status page that's typically used with autopilot. We use that as well. So now we can control those core applications that must be there. So really, if you can do the custom image or your golden image if that's what you need to, but Intune does a really good job of deploying applications, deploying scripts, deploying configuration items, you know, and all sorts of different configurations. So, you know, if you're going to go to something like this, I would challenge you to maybe step away from, you know, the golden image, at least play with that, because you don't have to maintain it. That's one less thing that you got to do in a month. You know, you don't have to rebuild it and kick it off and did it work and then smoke test it or UAT it. No, you just let Intune just deploy the stuff and go on to something else. Questions on images?
Nope, we're kind of keeping them all down below in chat. Thanks.
Got it. Some of the other settings that you can control. We have a tab for user settings. And so there's one that allows you to, you can target this policy to an Azure AD group, and then those users would become local admins on their box. Great for developers, maybe not so good for accounting, you know, but you've got that flexibility to choose. The other thing that we have in that tab is point-in-time restore, which I haven't covered yet. And so what point-in-time restore allows you to do is to do audit holds on the cloud PC. In order to take advantage of that, you do need to have a storage blob or a storage account. I think you use a storage blob, but you need to have that set up. And then what will end up happening is you can detach the VHD, and then you can go ahead and mount it, look at it, do your forensic analysis. You have the option to either allow or deny a user access while it's in audit hold. But what we also built on top of that with the point is the with the audit holding and the VHD handling is we also have snapshotting, which is really what the point in time restore is. So automatically, right out of the box, we're already backing up. I think we're backing up once a day, I think it is our default. You can have it, I think, take a snapshot every couple of hours. You can allow the user to set the frequency. And I think in the web portal, you can allow them to control their own snapshot restoration. So, you know, again, for developers who they may be running, you know, all sorts of crazy configurations and stuff on their machine, yeah, you know, go nuts. You know, people that don't necessarily have that requisite, you know, knowledge, you may not want to give them that, but you've got that control. The last thing I wanted to cover before I get into demo. Here's where our big ticket roadmap is. And so right now, if you wanted to run Windows 365 on Windows, on a Windows PC, you're going to use essentially, you're going to use the same client you're using for ABD. We have a Windows 365 native app coming, which will bring in the value and the additional features that we've baked into the web portal experience. We'll bring that to the desktop. It gives you a nice separation between ABD and Windows 365. Very, very nice stuff. There's a lot of devs that are working really hard on that one now. We've got the Windows 365 boot, which just directly boots the machine right into the cloud PC. The end user has no access to that physical hard drive, so your thin clients, and that's really what I'm excited for, is being able to to send somebody a $150 puck, plug it in, boop, and they essentially could have a developer grade machine that you don't have to asset track or get back, which is pretty cool. We will be introducing something called Switch. Any of these names too, they may change. This was still fairly early in the development cycle when this was announced. The Windows 365 Switch. So how like in Windows you have like the desktop switcher, where you can have a desktop for development, one for games, or whatever you want to do and organize your tasks. There'll be one in there for cloud PC. And so when you want to switch back and forth between desktop and cloud, that's right there in the toolbar. Now, what's really neat is Windows 365 offline. And what that will allow you to do is to synchronize your cloud PC to your physical machine. So you could be, traveling, you're on an airplane, and the Wi-Fi drops because it will. The PC will take a minute to sync, and then you just go back to working. And then once the internet comes back up, it restores and synchronizes the data back up to the cloud. How all that exactly is going to work, what kind of features, best use cases, that has yet to even be discussed or shared yet. So anything I would say is speculation. But as a diehard Microsoft fan for decades, I love thinking about the scenarios that you could do with that. Whether I don't want to get into it because I don't want to be like make it look like I'm promising something that's not going to happen. But being able to synchronize a physical machine to a cloud PC, there's a lot of possibilities there. So I'm sure everyone is already tired of looking at slides, because I am. So that's enough PowerPoint. I've got some more slides when we get into the graph and the PowerShell stuff. But at this point, I think you really want to actually see how this thing works. And so I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this. Oops. Where is... That's the one I was looking for. Just to end the slideshow. Okay. So and the connection where I am at is not necessarily the absolute greatest, so there might be a little bit of internet lag, but it should still be tolerable. And so if you're familiar with Intune, this should look really familiar. There is a section down here, Windows 365. In order for that to turn on and be useful, you need to apply one Cloud PC license, and then it unlocks the whole interface. And so where we've talked about the images and the networking and the user settings, those essentially already live here. And the only thing we really haven't talked about yet is provisioning policies. So right out of the gate, there's not a ton here. If you think in AVD, how many different tabs in Windows and portals and checkboxes and dropdowns that you need to get into. It's just not the same. It's not. All right. The demo gods are going to smile upon me. Let me do this. I'm going to drop my camera just to see if that can eke out a little bit of bandwidth. All right, come on. All right, cool. So essentially what we got here, we have our landing page and our splash, our splash screen, telling us the systems that have been provisioned, our account. So provisioned, these are successfully built machines. Failed ones are the ones that failed, and there's the ones that are in grace period. So what grace period means is, let's say you remove the license from a user. Well, what having a grace period allows you to do is, because without that license, the user in theory would never be able to log in, but the grace period gives you the time as an admin to work with the machine or re-put the license back so the machine doesn't immediately just blow up. That's controllable through Graph. The grace period amounts are. And then we've got the Azure networking connection. So I'm going to go hop right over into Azure network connection, because that's really where you would need to start. So if you remember from the conversations about networking, we really essentially had two different types. And so we can see here on our drop-down option, we've got Azure AD and a hybrid Azure AD. Let's just go ahead and I'm going to go and walk through. Let's see if I can hit the hybrid one. I'm not going to complete this because I don't have a site-to-site. Oh, I do, but I kind of broke my domain. So I'll just kind of walk through this as a high level. The only real difference really between the two is you need to be able to specify the OU you want to put in, domain name, and a domain join account. That's really functionally the main difference between doing hybrid and Azure AD. So I guess that being said, let's just walk to the AD one. So we'll go ahead and we'll give it a name, and that's the type is chosen, my subscription, my resource group, my network, and my subnet. That's all I had to do to configure networking. I just had to point it at it. You had to do the heavy lift of actually going into Azure and setting up that VNet. But once it's built, that's really all it is. I mean, you can see next, we're already at the review and create tab. It's just that simple. I'm not going to build it because I don't need one. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out. And again, too, the difference between doing the Azure AD and the hybrid is putting in the domain info. As a pro tip, if you're going to go down the hybrid route, you do need to configure custom DNS on the VNet, because you need to talk to you need to be able to resolve the domain name, and the default Azure DNS doesn't know about your domain. So we've made our networking connection. So next thing we need to do is, if you're going to do custom images, you can upload them from here. It comes from your own storage. I don't think it uses a shared image gallery. I've got one up here from, how long ago was that? From a year ago, just testing. I never used the custom images. See, provisioning policies are really where the magic's going to happen. And so the provisioning policy is going to give us essentially our configuration of the cloud PC. Come on. All right, so let's go ahead and say we're going to go ahead and say demo. And then with our provisioning policy, we can tell it which type of join we're going to do. And if we want to do Microsoft hosted network, we don't have to build the Azure network connection at all. We can just come right to here. If you need to use an ANC, you can go ahead and select one. Same thing essentially with hybrid. You just need to have an ANC that's passed the health checks. And we do have health checks that run, we can call it a watchdog service that's checking to make sure that URLs can be resolved, and DSC scripts can be run, and all sorts of configurations and stuff are suitable. So if you've got a hybrid one that's passed, then it should show up here. I'm going to do Azure AD because I am. I'm going to, why not? I mean, it's 6 one, half dozen the other. All right, image. I'll use a gallery image. And we can see over here that we have options. And so I'll go ahead and take, why not? I'll take Windows 11 with Microsoft 365 apps. I don't care. It's Office, and it will always be Office. Marketing clearly didn't ask my opinion. But pick your image. That's ready to go. Our configuration. If you've ever had the displeasure of having to mess around with language packs, features on demand, local experience packs, you don't have to do that anymore. We can go ahead and pick a language. I'm going to use English US because I don't know how to read any of these, most of these. But if you need to, if you're going to be, deploying cloud PCs in a global deployment, You can have multiple provisioning policies with different languages that are tied to different regions, which makes it ridiculously simple. Actually, no, I do want to show you guys something. Let me go back. So if I went here and I did Microsoft hosted, so when I talked about building your VNets, you had to have a VNet in a supported region. If you do hosted, all you have to do is just tell it where do you want it to be, and it'll stick it there. So I'll do East US 2. The gallery image we chose. I'll take English. We do have the option of leveraging auto patch with the service. Auto patch essentially, how do I put that? It takes over the patching and evaluation and of doing pilot versus production patching, and Microsoft handles that for you. So that's one other business that you could get out of as an IT professional. Since I haven't onboarded my tenant with Windows Auto Patch, I'm going to select none, but that's something there for you. All right. Next is who do we want to assign this to? Let's say I've got 80 groups set up. I'll do Windows 365 users. And that's it. You have now just seen like 90% of all your options within Windows 365. I'm not going to build it because I don't need it. I've already got ones that'll work for the demo, and I don't want to sit here and wait for the 5 minutes for it to churn. So I'll cancel it. But that's literally that is our biggest configuration policy. So the last thing too we have is our user settings, which again we've got, either make them a local admin, allow the user to roll back their VM, and how often to have the snapshot taken. All right, now you have seen all of the configuration items for Windows 365. Thoughts, observations, comments, questions?
No, looking good. Keep on
All
going.
right.
Actually, I do have a quick question.
Shoot.
When you said rollback, is there a report or dashboard or something that you can see to see how often people are using the rollback?
I don't think so now. That is a darn good question, though. And if we don't already have a feature request in for that, I'm going to make that a feature request because that's a very good idea. But yeah, I don't think that there's a canned report to show that just now. Now you may be able to pull that out through Graph. There may be a count somewhere in there. Report frequency of rollbacks.
I'm always fascinated by these advanced features that are out there but are so rarely used, and so I'm always curious to see what the metrics are on those.
Sure. So let's go ahead and actually build a cloud PC. So I've got 2 in here now, and I'll let that bake. So let me go into my groups. I've already assigned my license to an Azure AD group. So, if you go into the admin portal and apply licenses, you can do a group-based license, which is by far the most common. You may not want to do it that way. I'll cover that one in a bit, but it's totally supported, totally works. Members, add a member. Right. And when she gets added to the group, it shouldn't take too long. All right. So now at this point, we need to have Intune bake a bit. But what we should see here, if it's not already started, once this data resolves, we'll see 2 cloud PCs that are already provisioned and Amelia's cloud PC being built. So again, the concept of we need 1,000 machines. Okay, dump the users into the group. System picks up and starts building them. Oh, come on. I don't get why this is so pokey. Well, I think there's an issue in the router. I'm not at my usual location, so normally, yeah, this is not an artifact of Intune. Trust me, it's not. All right, so let's see what I'm looking for. I'm just trying to get it to refresh. Actually, if it's not already baked, if it's not already in provisioning, we'll go ahead and move on and just give it a little bit of time, because there are synchronization cycles that happen between Azure AD and Intune. So it's not, you dropped it in and boom, that second it is, but usually within a minute or two, it'll start the provisioning process. Aggravating. Come on. All right, well, let's do this. The demo gods are not smiling upon me today. That's all right. Come on. It'll kick off here. So while that's baking, let's actually, you know what? I know I'm clicking around because I'm impatient and slightly embarrassed that this is taking forever to resolve, and this is usually very snappy. It's just a function of local bandwidth. What I'm hoping to see is be able to click off one of the cloud PCs and look at the configuration. Yeah, I'm just going to go direct. Let's go look at Windows devices. Okay, so this is my cloud PC. And so if you've used Intune, you know, this looks like any other you know, type of machine. There should be buttons up here. Full screen. Okay. Okay, so we can see like our restore points. This should show, so we can see, and yeah, you can see the snapshots that I already have. I could go ahead and choose one and do a restore. What I'm looking for though is there they are. Cool, so if you've used Intune, most of these buttons are going to look familiar, but some of them are going to be new, like restore, reprovision, and resize. So restore, that's going to go ahead and show us the result, the restore points. That would pick up, you know, if the bandwidth is a little bit speedier. Reprovision is just going to go ahead and discard that virtual machine and just build new. So you're starting off from scratch. And then there's resize. And this is where your licensing comes into play. So let's say you've deployed, you know, a bunch of 2x8 machines and they're just not snappy enough for certain users. You can add resources to that existing virtual machine and preserve the user data. Now, as of today, that only works with licenses that are deployed or assigned to individual objects, individual users, not groups. So if you are doing group-based licensing, essentially what you need to do is, let's say you have two Azure AD groups, you got a 2x8 and a 4x16. What you would do is you would take the user out of the 2x8, their cloud PC goes in grace period. You take the license, 2x8 license, you apply it to the user. Then you take a 4x16 license and apply it to the user. You then go ahead and trigger the resize. It makes it now a big machine. You remove the 2x8 license, you remove the 4x8 individual, and then you move the user into the group where it repicks up a license. So it's a little bit of a licensing musical chairs. We know that is not an optimal solution, and we're working on it, like many things. But the fact of the matter is, you can go up in size. As of today, you cannot go down in size. But that will likely change. I know we've done a fair amount of investigation and feasibility and talk to demand. So we know that's been a big ask. But those are, the things that make this really different from, another type of Windows device in here. Oh, and there's also Place Cloud PC under review. So if you want to do it onto, put it on audit hold, you pick your subscription, pick your storage account. I don't have one. I got rid of one because I'm not making profile disks for FS Logic anymore. So why pay for that? And then, are you going to allow the machine to be used while it's under review? It's pretty cool. Now, one thing to point out here, I've said that you can manage this like a physical PC, and you can, but there's one thing that's different is while we now have TPM chips for the cloud PCs, we don't support BitLocker. Why? If you've ever been through a BitLocker recovery, where for whatever reason you can't get in the PC, you got that blue screen that says, okay, here's this GUID, go ahead and call the help desk to get this number. Well, that's before the logon screen. But with the services, you don't get access to the machine until you get to the login screen. So if something were to go south and it would to get locked and look for a recovery key, the user would never be able to access it. Not a good look. So what's our solution for that? Because we're not just going to leave everything unencrypted because that's hard. No. All of our data at rest is encrypted. All of our traffic is encrypted. All of our communications is encrypted. So it's not like it's just sitting there, just open and exposed. If the machine's powered off, detached, all of the data is stored and encrypted. Now, for some folks, that's still not good enough because if the organization doesn't control the encryption mechanism, they're not going to pass an audit. So we have coming, and I think it's on our public roadmap as well, is customer managed keys. So you can provide a key to encrypt your data at rest. So now you own it and Microsoft can't unlock it, but just don't lose that key. And I think that ends up that'll probably end up in well, I'm not going to speculate because I'm not on that team. I don't want to get myself into trouble. But generally speaking, yeah. The other thing that we don't have today, we don't have GPUs, but we have had lots of feedback on that. So that's when we're investigating. Virtualization, we do have that currently on 8x32 machines in certain regions. So, if you need to run Docker, Windows Subsystem for Linux, Hyper-V, we can do that. We're investigating expanding out to different SKUs. That's another ask. So we're looking at trying to make this the most flexible solution for customers. But that's where we're at with that one right now. Questions?
I have a question about machine sizing. Does this follow
Sure.
the standard Azure VM machine sizing? So you have the A series, the B series, D series, F series, etc.
No. So what we guarantee is that if you buy a 2x8 license, you're going to get a 2-core 8 gig virtual machine as advertised. We're not exposing which VM it is. That's more of an internal matter to us. But if you think, not every virtual machine type is available in every region. So if we were to need to fail over, let's say we promise you're going to be on a DS4 V2. We have to fail you over to this zone. Well, that's not there. Then what do you do? So it's really more of a flexibility, and it's an ease thing as well.
Yeah, I get that the D series is the most popular, but usually, at least in my experience, people are asking for more RAM than they are cores.
Okay.
And so the core to RAM ratio of the D series doesn't make sense, where the F series makes more sense for them.
Okay. I'm not sure how granular we've gotten on the licensing. Like anybody that works with Microsoft stuff in depth, like I really typically don't get involved in the licensing discussions. I know that the most common SKUs are 2x8 and 4x16. If you wanted to use this and you needed to have that more RAM, you could ask for that or raise that as a feature request. I think I want to try something here. I think I may just go ahead and try to hardwire in because I think it's the Wi-Fi here that's just killing me. Yeah, this is. Do you mind if I just go on mute for 2 minutes if you guys want to take a quick bio break? 'Cause I know some of you are drinking beers, so you might need to respect the beer life cycle.
You're good.
Is that
We'll edit it in post. It's okay. Go.
all right? Cool. I will be right back.
Well, overall, I think this is pretty interesting. So,
Yeah, and
you don't mind,
so-
I'm going to jump right into Jason's comments. So, Jason, I get that the ratios are the same, but they're different on the various class of machines based on what you're trying to do. Especially if you get into the shared models like the B series, and so it's all about trying to find the right balance for your application space.
Yeah, no, I think what I was trying to convey is, I don't have a lot of experience with this. I'm currently in a POC actually where we're evaluating this versus Azure Virtual Desktops versus Amazon Workspaces, right? But the only experience I have with this kind of anything similar to this is Citrix in the past. I always worked with Citrix. We were a Citrix shop at my last job. And I remember, when it came to sizing the back-end servers for the VDI environment versus, your typical VMware clusters, we made the mistake. We still figured it would require more CPU, but we completely underestimated it. And so I'm kind of curious how they have these 2 CPU to 4 gig of RAM, 2 CPU to 8 gig of RAM, 4 CPU. I mean, we were finding in many cases, people needed at least 2 CPU and usually more like 4 CPU. On the
in Azure,
Windows guests.
at least on the standard stuff, you'll see that there's a 1-to-4 ratio. So if you get 1 core, you get 4 gig of RAM. If you get 2 cores, you get 8. If you get 4, you get 16. And what I've discovered is like if you've got a hungry RAM app, so you're trying especially the Office products, they're kind of RAM hungry. So you need minimum of 16, prefer 32 for multitasking, multi-everything. But frankly, it's not computing that hard. So you only need 2 cores, even if you got 32 gig, or it's probably a good idea to get 4. So that's why I like the different classifications that you can get on Azure for trying to get those ratios right.
Now, one thing I would throw in the whole ratio discussion, because those are all very good points. Today, cloud PCs don't have a GPU, so your CPU is going to be a little bit busier, especially if you're opening a lot of browser tabs or you're doing a lot of video stuff. So having those extra cores isn't bad. But yeah, I totally get the RAM perspective on that. Just as personal anecdote, I started on a 2x8 machine running standard Office, web browsing. I was just fine. It wasn't a lightning fast machine, and I ended up asking for a 4x16 machine because I started getting into script development and running more applications. So, like anything, when if you want to try this out, user acceptance testing is really going to be crucial, just to see get that feedback. Is this enough to run our core applications? Do we maybe virtualize these core applications and put those on an AVD and then do it as a remote app to the cloud PC? There's a million ways you can skin those skin those cats. But
Donna, do you guys, with regard to your optimizations, do you do anything that, when you compare like a server OS CPU at idle compared to like a Windows workstation CPU at idle, vast difference, right? A server can easily hover around 10 to 13%, even less depending on what it's doing. Whereas a Windows desktop, it's going to be sitting around 20%. It's going to have lots of spikes, but past 50. Are there any optimizations to make your Windows guests more like Windows Server with regard to CPU usage? Or what do you guys do behind the scenes? What's the secret sauce?
The secret sauce is not published yet. We've had enough people that we're working on how to do that. But essentially what we're doing is we're removing services that aren't relevant to a VDI, app pack, or like the pre-provisioned apps, some registry key tweaks. And I'm looking forward to it when because if you look at our docs, it's kind of kind of hand wavy, like I just said. But hopefully we can get that out there so we have full transparency. But it's not dissimilar to those optimizations, except for like your server OS isn't going to come with like Microsoft Wallet or those other consumer apps, and some of those we're ripping out of the gallery image. The one thing I did want to point out, though, is you can see that the Cloud PC is in fact provisioning, and that was all triggered just based off of me adding that user into that AD group. No Game Pass for you. Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know how well that would work. Trying to play games in the Cloud PC without a GPU, I suppose maybe you could do streaming, but I would be willing to bet you could probably still wouldn't be very good. Yeah, you'd need the GPU. All right, so you want to see what this looks like. What's the end user experience? I'm glad you let me ask that rhetorically. So we've got multiple ways that users can connect in. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to do a new in private, and then I'm going to go to windows365.microsoft.com and we'll see what account. Yeah, sign out. Yeah, sign out. And let's go ahead and log on to mine. So I'm going to do so on the user's first time, the take a tour is going to pop up and show them that here's where this check button, here's where these buttons and such live. It's which is kind of nice for the users. But besides just the web portal, we also have clients. So if we want to hit this button, we now have links to all of our supported native operating system clients. Windows, we have 64, 32, and ARM. We've got iOS, we've got Android, we've got Mac OS. So we've got all the major operating systems. And so, if you're going to provision this for users, you could tell them just to go ahead and log into here and then click the little download button and go get what makes sense. And on whatever device they're running on, they could go ahead and install it if you're doing something like a BYOD.
But that's the same, RDP client that's in most machines anyway.
No.
No?
No. This one, at least for the Windows side, this is a special remote desktop client. It's not MSTS.MSC, and it's also not the remote desktop app in the Microsoft Store. I know the branding and the naming makes it really confusing, and it's again, marketing didn't ask me.
Okay, well, good because I assumed it was the other way around. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And if you're using ABD, it's the same. It's the same client. I mean, it's oh, here it is. This is what I'm using for work.
So I saw on the other screen too is that it's you can just do it all through the web too, right? Is that what I saw?
Yes, you can, and that's what I'm going to do for this demo here.
Okay.
So your user can log in here, and then they could, let's say, they don't like the naming convention that you've given this machine has gotten. Okay, I'm going to call this. Apparently doesn't like smiley faces. Okay. We can see what SKUs are assigned. We can also, you can run a troubleshooter to get some info. Users can reboot this. Default non-admin users don't have access to restart within the start menu. And they're not going to be able to open up CMD and then do, shutdown /r/T0 so they can come into here. When we have our native app that I talked about earlier, this will all be unified, so it'll all be natively together. And then we can also just open the thing. And so we can control some of the, if we want to do an alternate keyboard layout, or if we want to pass microphone clipboard, I'm going to leave those there because I need those. You can control those through policy if you want to shut that stuff off. I'm going to hit connect, and I'm going to get a second prompt. This is normal for now. Our single sign-on is coming soon as well. So let's see. And boom, I'm at my desktop. So I'm gonna go ahead and collapse this toolbar. And so like, oops, yeah, you can see like, look, hey, it's Windows, you know, and I haven't logged into this thing since Monday, but you know, my work is still there because I just walked away from it. And since I'm not trying to cycle these things down to save a buck, I don't have to worry about, you know, apps closing or saving user data or whatever. You can just close it and walk away, which is fantastic. You know, from a performance standpoint, you know, we can, and remember, this is a 2x8 machine. And so if we want to go ahead and do, let's go ahead and.
From an admin perspective, and you know, using some of that, you can do you care enough to like manage, like, hey, user reports that my VDI, my Windows 365 is slow or something like that? Are there metrics that you can do, or you know, kind of like in Graph, I can, you know, look inside of there and see, hey, some reporting and metrics to see what users' performance is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have within reports, we can find it. I think that they've just put this in the dashboard. Yep. So you can look at remoting connections and resource performance. So what we gave you from an analytics standpoint here on the remoting connections, this is just to help you know, get you some type of grasp on network connectivity that the end users coming in from, because Lord only knows what people have at home. So at least that way you can see round trip time between, you know, the cloud PC and the endpoint. We can look at the model, and there's also device in it. You know, if I had more in here and actually we're using, because you need to have certain logged on time values to actually start picking this up. And this isn't a demo environment, I don't. But you can see, you know, individual device performance. So if you can get the user's, you know, name, you can find their cloud PC, then you can actually see what kind of round trip they're getting. The other thing that
most of this is also in Graph too, so I can like write reports to instead of coming into this interface, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
and
in
then
there, probably.
Yeah, and then we also got a resource performance as well, and so you know that could be queried. But you can see you know your spike timing, what kind of percentages, and so we have some of that data. We have that data in there to help you at least rationalize. So yeah, we determined we were going to roll it by 2x8s, but now we got a crap ton of CPU spiking, and everyone's complaining that this is slow. But we've got great network connectivity. Maybe it is CPU. Let's investigate. There's more. We're working on more data, better data, more precise data. It's I wish I could share some of the fun stuff that I know is coming, but we're working on this. We're going to make this data better, more transparent, to give admins the information they need to be able to determine, did we buy a big enough CPU or cloud PC? Do we need these licenses in the first place? One of the big questions that we've had from day one is, how do I know people are using this? Because at 50, depending on, let's call it an average $50 a month, just for the sake of ease. We got $50 a month licenses, and we bought 1,000 licenses. Are people using it? That report's not in here today. I do have a script I wrote in on our GitHub repo, which actually is querying Azure AD logons to the Windows 365 service, and we can use that as a proxy, because if you're over the course of a month you have 2 logons, well, yeah, you weren't using your cloud PC. That's one of the feedback.
To aggregate logons, or is that I can tell you the 5 users who were using them, 5 users who were not?
I can show you the script. Really, it's looking at the parameter. How am I doing this? You can set the
I don't want
day,
to
the
get too
time.
off target either, so
Yeah.
so that's why we
Okay.
can talk about it later.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll give you the link to the GitHub repo, and then you can go ahead and pick through my code, and you give me grief for my style. I'm not the most elegant scripter, but I can get the job done. But anyway, to get to that original point, do we have reports and utilities that we can use to find out how these things are performing? Yes, we do have those. I guess from the the user perspective, I mean, it's I don't know, it's a Windows PC. Like, okay, now Edge is just starting up and it's building itself, so it unsurprisingly is consuming a bit, but it'll end up settling down. But let's see if it will let me go to, I don't know. Oh, that's working. Let me go ahead and open up. I didn't build this one with Office. Okay, fine. Let's go ahead and look at Paint. File Explorer. Let's go and open up that. So you can see that the CPU is getting a little bit of work, but anytime you open a window, that would typically get offloaded to a GPU. So there are some tweaks you can do with Edge to save on some cycles to ease up on it. But if you don't have that up, it's it's really not bad. I'm using I use the Cloud PC as my daily driver, and I'm very happy with it. Matter of fact, I'm not at home right now, so what I did is I built my site VPN back up to Azure, but instead of trying to do a direct VPN, and I just built a Cloud PC through it on the ANC that has my VPN connected to it. I can just remote in over the site to site. I mean, it's responsive. Things move. Tabs change. You want to have your different desktops. I don't think I have this configured, so that may be unhappy. But yeah, it's really just fine. And if that's still not enough, like if you need to have something that needs more than 4x16, we have the other SKUs. Or if those SKUs don't meet, I mean, you could fall back to AVD, but I'd kind of like you to stay on Windows 365 for clearly selfish reasons.
That's cool. So does the Windows 365 have a specific graph API that we can get other metrics from it, or you were mentioning it was strictly for the other way?
No, you could. I've got the docs already pulled up. I'll show you. I will show you that. So I guess for the sake of time, because I know we're coming up the top of the hour. Is it safe to assume that everybody here has a rudimentary understanding of a graph?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm still working on my rudimentary graph.
We'll work together. We'll work together.
All right. So if we're going to be looking, there's an excellent doc on the Windows 365 Graph API. Everything that we've got in the UI has a Graph API tied to it. So everything that you've seen in console, you can do with Graph. Full stop. It's just that simple. And the docs are fantastic because we can go ahead and see, okay, let's look at, I want to list all the Cloud PCs. And so I could go ahead and look at list Cloud PC, and then here's my HTTP request. Or if you kind of, still prefer working with PowerShell, boom, there's the PowerShell equivalent right there. So, it's all very well documented. For some of our bulk actions, which may not be in console, like bulk reprovisioning, bulk restore. I'm curious, it doesn't look like, okay. There'll be more of those coming. Ending the grace period, that's if you rip the license away from a user and say they've termed and you just want to get rid of the machine. You don't want to let it sit around for 7 days. You can call the Graph API to go ahead and do it. We've actually got a script in our repo that will go through and look for every Cloud PC that's in grace period and go ahead and tell them to be deprovisioned. And so, rebooting, renaming, reprovision, that's all right there. Which to me is, this is great. I still tend to think in PowerShell more than Graph. So, if you try to look at, as an example here, let's go ahead and look up, look at this name. This name that's a painful name. but it's actually based off of the graph URL name. And so, you've got the action type Microsoft graph. So it's going to be reprovision / device management / virtual endpoint / cloud PC. And so the names aren't necessarily all that elegant, but the computer doesn't care. But I guess one of the points I wanted to show too is if we went to go ahead and look at the PowerShell page for this, it's and it's auto-generated. Yeah, so you can look at that, but these docs just aren't, to me, they're not as nice as the graph one, but you've got all of those there. The modules that you need, and actually I've got this on the slide deck, so let me show you what's relevant here. Here it is. Let's do from current slide. Okay, these, oops, shoot. Yeah, so device management, functions, admin enrollment, users function, device management action. These are the only graph modules you really need. Sure, you could go ahead and do an install graph, install -module -name Microsoft.graph, and it absolutely will. And you'll get modules to manage teams and Azure Active Directory and everything that has a graph call, or you can just install what you need. What I've actually started doing in my scripts is if we go ahead and look at, okay, let's look at this guy. This should show somewhere in here. It's got your permissions. Oh, somewhere in here. I thought that it listed out the modules that were needed. Yeah, okay, import module. So you can see there's the module that you need. So if you just pull this one, then you can go ahead and run this particular action. So what I've done in my base scripts, and I'll show you those on the repo, is I just have a just a list of here are the modules that I want. And I just iterate through each one and check if it's installed. If not installed, install. Instead of installing the whole graph module because it's a monster. And so for the GitHub repo that I wrote, and it's mostly I haven't written all of it. I've written 95% of it. Where my original charter came into play is to make example scripts so folks can get started. And so I have a base script, and the base script is essentially going to handle all the authentication. And so, I got the functions for looking for graph, doing the connection, setting the profile. This is an interesting one. With graph, you've got version 1 and you got 2.0, like you can, or beta, like. And I forget the time frame, but for a graph API to be listed in 1.0, it needs to be stable and around for X amount of time. Well, we haven't been around an X amount of time, so everything that's Cloud PC is going to be under beta. And so, yeah, I've got the section to kick it over to beta, but I've got all of those things and make sure the modules are there with the version number, and then you can just go ahead and start adding your code. And then what I did is I wrote off, script. So like, okay, show me all the Cloud PCs by grace period. Great. So right here is I'm just going to go ahead and get my Cloud PCs and do my magic. And that's kind of where the starting point was for this, was to give folks a place to, I've got an idea, but I'm not good at scripting, but I can pick them apart. Cool. And then give them examples and building blocks. But I kind of got sidetracked by other issues. Because one of the things that we do in CAT is sometimes you try to fill gaps temporarily. So we had WebRTC. I know somebody was asking about Teams optimizations, If you're not familiar with Teams on VDI, there is a WebRTC service that offloads video to the physical endpoint, which is very important since there's no GPUs in Windows 365, and trying to stream all of that is challenging. So we have this WebRTC service. Now the problem we ran into is this dumb thing doesn't update itself, and it's not part of Windows, so it doesn't get updated by Windows Update. So how do admins fix that? Well, they can just go ahead and install the new one. But the problem is when you uninstall that, or when you install that, it kills all Teams processes. So you can't just push it out willy-nilly. So I wrote this proactive remediation package to detect which version it is and what the latest version is, and then compliant or not. And then the remediation script, I actually wrote a whole process to determine if the user's logged on, and if the user is logged on, are they active or inactive? And if they were either not logged in or were inactive, then I could go ahead and rip out the old WebRTC and reinstall the new one. And that actually solved a lot of issues we had with clients or customers on Teams. Here's the cloud usage report one. Because we had customers. Go ahead.
Is this this is really the repo that we should be going to gather some more information about trying to manage the Windows 365 from PowerShell and stuff?
Yeah, it's mostly going to be yes, it's a good starting point.
Are there any of the good other resources that you can recommend?
Off the top, I know that Morton. There's an MVP, and his last name escapes me, but he's written a couple. He's been blogging very heavily. I think he's an MVP actually in Windows 365. He's written a tool to do that. You know that license, hokey pokey had to do. He wrote a script to go ahead and do that more automatically and based it off of my base templates. If you guys want as a follow-on, I can give you a list of some of the other blogs out there just to give you some other places to start.
That works, and we can tweet it out, or you could tweet it out and we can retweet from there. So that sounds good.
Oh, you know what? That's a great idea, because there's plenty of good people that could use a good old-fashioned shout out from Twitter. And so I've got other issues that have either been fixed or needed something in place because it was causing problems. So I kind of got sidetracked on those bigger ones, but I'm really trying to rein it back in and get back to my core charter of giving examples so folks can start piecing their own components together. If you noticed or maybe didn't, these ones are actually these are all PowerShell auth ones. I do have a base package written for Graph. I just haven't gotten to publishing yet. I've gotten distracted with all sorts of fun stuff I can't talk about yet, but I'll get back there. Actually having just the Graph authentication versus, and then the Graph calls versus just getting the invoke dash. So,
well, awesome. This has been a ton of great content. I really appreciate it. And what else can we go through, because we're getting close to time?
We are. I think at this point I'd probably just put it out to any other questions. When it comes to things that some folks have been automating, at least for my customers, really has been new employee onboarding. Trying to tie it into like an SAP or some other type of HR ERP workflow. And as long as that's extensible and you can make an API call, all those APIs are already exposed. So if you already know what you're doing with Graph API, it's really somewhat trivial. And really all you really need to do is have the script go ahead and add the user in Azure AD group. And since you already got your license applied in bulk to an Azure AD group, so long as you can make that call to do like add AAD user dash group name 2x8 Windows 365. User goes in and that triggers the whole backend workflow of Windows 365.
So Donna, you had a handful of people that asked you questions, but I know you said you couldn't see the chat. The chat has been on fire pretty much since the start of the meeting, just talking about the various things that you've been mentioning.
Okay.
we have a very talented group of people that attend. So many of the questions that people were asking they made it out of chat because someone had a relevant answer to give them. So
Okay.
you didn't see a lot of people coming your way, but there has been a very active and vigorous discussion about what you've been showing tonight. And so I think this chat, this talk has been well received. I think it's been a topic that a lot of people can relate to. And so kudos to you. We really appreciate you doing this tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk something about that I'm passionate about. And it's I really am. I love Windows 365. To me, I mean, it looks to me as the future of Windows, and it's something that I'm actually absolutely just thrilled and proud and feel privileged to be a part of. So
it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. We're gonna be wrap. I was just gonna say we're gonna wrap up here soon. I just want to encourage anybody that's been hanging out with us this whole time. If you still have questions, Donna's still available to ask questions. Feel free, she might be coming to the end of her prepared demo stuff, but we can still answer questions. So if you have a few things you want to ask Donna, please do so now before we wrap up here. So I'm sorry, Donna, I cut you off there.
So I would say, if you don't want to ask, in public, my DMs on Twitter are open. So if you got a question, you can just shoot me a DM. That's totally cool. My email is ryandonna@microsoft.com if email is more your thing. I guess the one question I would ask is, after looking at this, and I think especially the VDI admins, is this now something that you would consider adding to your arsenal of solutions? Try and see if I've made any converts.
I
There
think
you are.
so.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
I had a question related to this question.
Okay.
So if I have an express route and I wanted to redirect the RDP traffic through the express route, if I have my express route Microsoft peered instead of the private peering, would the RDP traffic for a Microsoft hosted Windows 365 connection go through the express route?
So if you're doing a Microsoft hosted, no, it will not touch your express route, because your express route is tied to your on-premises and to your virtual networking. Microsoft hosted network is we control it, and it's not attached to anything else. If you were doing you bring your own network, then yeah, you could peer it or tie it or however you wanted to implement the express route. But hosted network is, there's no way to tie an express route to that. You'd have to go full VPN client.
So there are 3 types of peering for express route connections. So there is a private peering, which is the exact thing that you said. Then there's the public peering, which is basically I can, even for my PaaS traffic, it would go through the express route. And then there's something called Microsoft peering, which is the link I just pasted in the chat.
Okay.
Which my understanding is your Word, Excel connection the Windows 365 connection then goes through the express route. So would that include the Microsoft 365 connection then goes through the express route? So my question is, would that include the Windows 365 RDP traffic?
I don't think so, but I don't know enough about this peering, so I don't want to give you a definitive answer either way. My gut would be no, but again, I don't know for sure. I'm not that much of a networking nerd to have gotten this far into it, so I'm sorry, I can't.
Your Microsoft peering is primarily for your Office traffic. You can peer there's some other stuff, and it's in the docs it specifically calls out like what traffic is actually peered across that. That's a separate thing, and that's a request that you have to put in with Microsoft for that to be enabled. And then they will go through and try and set that up for you. But as far as whether or not the new 365 VD stuff would go across that, that's a different question, because that's more on the networking side. That's not necessarily application traffic related to Office or its affiliate. Yeah, there you go. All right, so dynamics and the other pieces of traffic. So that's something we'll have to ask the team.
Yeah, and I've not heard that even mentioned. And yeah, I've been in plenty of internal calls about networking. So that's a good question. I'm going to do my own due diligence on that one because I was unaware that that was actually a thing.
And so I just like to remind people that probably for these types of questions, the best thing to do is maybe reach out to Donna privately and let her find a technical resource at Microsoft that can speak a little bit more to that. She's a program manager, so she doesn't have the deep technical knowledge on every specific switch and parameter that's there, but she has access to those resources. So sometimes you guys are hitting her with a few things here that she would normally lean on a team member to answer, and so she's a little bit out of a loss for words here. So I would recommend reaching out to her, and she probably can put you in touch with the right resources.
Sure can. And or what you could also do too, like Julie's posted in the chat, if you want to start working with Fast Track, Fast Track is, my partner, my team's partner in crime when it comes to our daily functionality. So if you want to engage Fast Track, if this is something that you want to get started, and actually consider, absolutely reach out to Fast Track. I know that the requirement, I don't think it's all that extensive, and you can pick their brains and they can help you get the core stuff set up. So we Microsoft does have those resources available to put you in touch with the right people to ask every question. So.
Yep. And I will plug. Oh, sorry. I was going to plug the Fast Track team did a session yesterday on the lowdown, which is Perth here in Perth, their kind of local Microsoft office. But he's kind of head of Fast Track. But yeah, right now they're really plugging the fact that it's Fast Track is a no additional cost to you as a customer. And then depending upon your needs, but they are kind of more of the pre-engagement and more onboarding focused. It's not a break fix kind of scenario, unless they are part and parcel of setting up that service for you with you. But they're willing to work with you, engage with you, and really bring value to what you're trying to do. You're trying to shift that over and then look into anything, and you can even have them handle all of it, and an entire transition, and have them all set it all up. So they're really good resource to reach out for.
They really are.
All right, so I think we're going to wrap it up here.
Okay.
This has been a really good presentation. I actually wasn't very familiar with Windows 365, so it was really a good primer for me, and I got quite a bit out of this. It was really interesting to see. We've had a pretty vigorous conversation going on in the chat. We had some great questions. Donna really covered a lot of information there. I mean, there's a lot to cover, right? Just to get, for a while there, we had quite a few questions on config and different options. And so we ran the full gamut tonight, and then we finished up with some options you can use to script your management of these PCs. And so if you've been watching at home, we appreciate you making it to the end here. Hopefully you're watching this on our YouTube channel. And if you're interested in PowerShell content, please check out our channel. We have plenty of things to offer related to almost all things PowerShell and Azure. So take a look at that. And we want to say thank you to Donna for helping us out tonight. Donna, I think you did a fantastic job, and thank you so much for spending time with us.
You're welcome, Mike. Thank you for having me. Again, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Sure. And so we're going to wrap up here. This is going to be the end of our conversation. But if you'd like to join us in person next time, come and visit us at rtpsug.com or on Meetup. You can look for the Research Triangle PowerShell user group, and then you can get to ask your questions of our presenters at the next time. So we'll see you later, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.